Let's now get into our brand new segment here on the Louie T Network. And this is an exercise in fun. Okay. So, what we're doing here is something that is fun, but keep in mind there can only be one. Choose wisely, but there can only be one. What am I talking about? So, this segment called One. One is the loneliest number that you'll ever do. It's called One because I'm going to force you to make a decision, a tough one. And you could go either way. There is no right or wrong. It's just your opinion. And I've talked about this when we talk about receivers and we start ranking receivers, when we talk about quarterbacks, we start ranking quarterbacks, we start talking about running backs or any position in the league for that matter. It all comes down to preference. When we talk about players in the draft, I could talk to 10 people and talk about 3 different prospects, and all 10 can have different opinions on why they do or don't like that prospect, why they're high or not high on that guy for whatever reason because of preference. Okay. You like certain things in a player, you don't like these things, and whatever the case may be, that's why you base your opinion. That's how you base your opinion and judgments on that player based off of the things that you either like or don't like. So in this segment, I'm going to be pitting players against one another, and you've got to choose one. So I'm trying to make it as close as possible in terms of the players that we'll be comparing to one another. I don't want to compare a big 6'5" receiver to a 5'10" receiver because they're not one and the same. All right. I want guys that look like each other, that play similar to one another and have similar skill sets, have been in the league long enough that we can compare their games, or they've been in the league the same amount of time so that there's an apples to apples comparison. And I wanted to start out with a really tough one. You know, at the receiver position, it's my favorite position to take a look at. I've got Mike Evans, a.k.a. Mikey. Hey, Mikey. And I've got can't guard Michael Thomas. All right. So these are 2 big physical wide receivers. They're not blazers by any stretch of the imagination, but one can get vertical on you and has gotten vertical on you throughout his career. The other, not so much, but he's been a high volume guy that has hurt you in the short to intermediate game over and over and over and over and over and over again. So we're going to go through the tail of the tape, and I want you guys to tell me who you would take as your one. Okay, so let's go through the tail of the tape in the battle between Michael can't guard Mike Thomas and Mikey Evans. So I start with 1,000-yard seasons. Okay, and some of you are going to base your opinions off of the stats I give you. Some of you already have who you would take. You know how these guys play. You've watched their careers and you've already made up your mind, and that's great too. But I'm just going to give you more information that you can run with. So 1,000-yard seasons. Michael Thomas has been in the league 5 years. 4 out of his 5 seasons, he's eclipsed 1,000 yards. The only season that he did not was this past year when he was injured and only played in 7 games. So 4 out of 5 years, Michael Thomas over 1,000 yards. Mike Evans has been in the league 7 years, 7 for 7, eclipsing the 1,000-yard mark. The only receiver in NFL history. So that's a trivia question if you want to spring one on someone that they'll probably not get. Who's the only receiver in NFL history to start their career off with 7 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons? The answer to that trivia question would be one, Mike Evans. Now, there was 1 year in there where he barely got over 1,000, like literally 1,001 yards. It still counts. So 7 for 7 on the 1,000-yard season mark for Mike Evans. 4 out of 5 years for Michael Thomas this past year where he was injured. 1,400 yard seasons for me as a for me with receivers, the benchmark for an elite season is 1,400 yards, anywhere over 1,400 yards. You can have a season where you go nuts and you get 1,350. You could have a great year, go for 1,275. If you're really good, a good year is 1,100, to 1,000 yards. That's a really good season. You had a hell of a year. But if you want to talk about an elite season, when you want to put yourself in a different company, similar to as a pass rusher, once you eclipse 15 sacks, you're in a different stratosphere. You're not like the rest of the league because dudes aren't getting 15 sacks in the season. You could get lucky, have a 12 and a half sack season. If you were really good and you got some fortunate breaks, you could get 13 and a half sacks in the season. You're not going to get lucky and get 15 though. You're different. When you get 15, either you had an out-of-body experience that year or you're just different. You're built differently when you eclipse 15 sacks in a season. 1,400 yards is that same benchmark for me with receivers. You're not like the rest when you got 1,400 yards that year. Michael Thomas has 2 seasons of over 1,400 yards receiving, back-to-back years. In 2018, he went for 1,405. In 2019, he was the best receiver in all of football. 1,725 yards receiving, set the NFL record for most catches in a single season as well, with 149 in that season. Meanwhile, Mike Evans has only one 1,400 plus yard season under his belt. 100 catch seasons. So you could look at this and you could spin it one of two ways. You could look at a guy that's a high volume target, that's Michael Thomas, or you could look at it as a guy that doesn't need as many targets to be as effective, that's Mike Evans. So you can look at it, both ways. 100 catch seasons are big for me in this regard. When there aren't many other options and you're the best that your team's got and the other team knows that going into the game, and yet they still can't stop you from getting your hands on the football, that says a lot about your ability to either uncover and separate or to catch the football in traffic and be a reliable target. That said, in both situations, I've kind of felt like there haven't been a lot of other guys that can help. But in Tampa Bay, Mike Evans has had a lot more help than in New Orleans with Michael Thomas. So this kind of carries a little bit more weight for Michael Thomas because think about the Saints offense over the last 5 years. He's been there 5 years. So think about their offense. Name the number 2 receiver on their team that has been of any note over the last 5 years. I'll wait while you try to conjure up a name. The best number 2 receiver he's ever had in New Orleans was literally there last year, and he didn't even play with him in Emmanuel Sanders. So he's never really had another guy. They've used Alvin Kamara as another option out of the backfield. They've used the tight end position, whether it was Jimmy Graham or it was Jared Cook Jr., but they've used the tight ends. There never has really been another guy next to Michael Thomas to help take off some of that pressure. Whereas Mike Evans has had help throughout his career. So he hasn't necessarily needed to compile 110 catches for his team to be successful. But I said all that to say this: 100 plus catch seasons. Michael Thomas 3, Mike Evans 0. No career 100 catch seasons for Mike Evans. 3 of such for Michael Thomas. From 2017 to 2019, Michael Thomas had over 100 catches. That streak was broken last year, but he was on a streak where he was catching over 100 balls on average each and every single year for the last 3 years. 15 yards per catch average or more seasons. This is a big stat because if you're getting a bunch of dink and dunk throws, if you can compile 110 catches, I remember this very vividly as a Washington fan One year, Lavernius Coles was in Washington, and he had 93 catches, and he did not eclipse 1,000 yards. He had like 93 catches for like 910 yards or 980 yards or something like that. And I remember that season very vividly because it was a bunch of bubble screens, slants, outs, things that were 7 yards and in. That was the first year of Joe Gibbs back in the NFL. He was coming with this archaic offense that he was running back in Gibbs 1.0. The league had passed him by. He didn't evolve. He didn't even want to run shotgun. So remember, Gibbs 1.0 didn't run shotgun. So there wasn't a lot of nuance to the offense. And so it was a lot of get it out of the hands of the quarterback quickly. And Lavernius Coles didn't have a lot of yards after catch. Everything was short underneath. And he didn't average a ton of yards on those receptions. So, yeah, he had 90-something catches, but who gives a shit if you didn't even average 10 yards a grab? For receivers, anything north of 15, and that's a really good average. Michael Thomas, 0 seasons of 15 yards per completion or catch in his career. Meanwhile, Mike Evans has 4 such seasons of that. So what I'm telling you is Evans has been a bigger threat in his career, bigger plays, a bigger threat down the field to take the top off of the defense, a bigger threat to make a play down the field, stretch the football field vertically, whereas Michael Thomas has done most of his work underneath and in the intermediate. So you won't find a bunch of 65-yard Michael Thomas touchdowns. You won't find a bunch of 55-yard Michael Thomas touchdowns. Whereas with Mike Evans, you'll get the occasional 56-yarder. You'll get the occasional 68-yard bomb where he catches it and runs away. There's a lot of underneath work being done by Michael Thomas. And while there is something to be said about that, the amount of catches that you make, the high volume number of catches, and your ability to continue to move the sticks and things of that nature, there's also something to be said about being able to move to push the football down the field and make plays as a big threat down the field. And in that department, I think Mike Evans has Michael Thomas beat clearly. And then finally, we still have 2 more categories. Touchdown seasons, 10 touchdowns or more seasons. That's self-explanatory. You get in the red zone. Is this a guy that I can count on to make it happen? Or, the easiest way to score is to get a 45-yard touchdown or a 30-yard touchdown, something not in the red zone. Harder when you get down there and they're looking at you, and they're game planning to stop you. That said, Michael Thomas, 0 10 touchdown seasons. Mike Evans, 3 10 touchdown or more seasons in his career. So again, we're talking about a guy that finds a way to get it done when we get into the red zone, when we get down close by the end zone. There's one guy getting it done. There's another guy that he's getting it done, but not at a high enough clip. And keep in mind, some of those touchdowns from Mike Evans coming outside of the red zone. But I don't really care how you do it. I just need you to find the end zone. And touchdowns aren't always the greatest barometer. There were years in there where Julio didn't have many touchdowns to speak of. Now, I remember one year, I think he only had like 2 or 3 touchdowns receiving. Still a dominant force, just not getting in the end zone for whatever reason. So can't always go off of that, but that's still a big number. 3 10-plus touchdown seasons for Mike Evans, 0 for Michael Thomas. And then finally, years of 15-plus games played. The biggest ability is availability in this league. If you aren't able to play, you can't help your team. You can't be effective. So with that said, you're going to miss a game or two most years. If you can play all 16, that's awesome. You're going to play through some injuries. You're going to gut it out. That's what these Warriors do on a yearly basis, is they gut it out. You have no idea what guys are dealing with. They just suck it up and play. But as a receiver, you're going to tweak an ankle. There might be a hamstring. There's going to be some kind of soft tissue injury that may keep you out for a week or two. With that said, can you play 15 games? You're going to miss a game. There's the assumption that you're going to miss a game. Can you play at least 15 games or more? In Michael Thomas's career, he's played in 15 or more games 4 out of his 5 seasons, obviously with last year being the one season where he wasn't able to do that. In Mike Evans' career, he's played in 15 or 16 games in 6 out of 7 of his years in the league, with the only season him not playing 15 games, he played 13 in 2019. So what I'm essentially telling you is Mike Evans doesn't miss a lot of games. Neither does Michael Thomas up until last year. But Mike Evans doesn't miss a ton of games. So when it's all said and done, they each have their strengths. Evans is the more productive, more reliable, big play target, and he gets it done in the red zone, whereas Thomas is a more of a high volume physical specimen that amasses a ton of yards through his volume. He's like a high volume scorer in the NBA. Yep. He's averaging 28.9 points a game, but he's also taking 31 shots to get it. So you got to kind of gauge between which is which. At the end of the day, it's just what flavor are you? Do you want the big, lanky, tall receiver that can kind of go vertical and kind of work all 3 levels of the football field? Or do you want the big physical receiver that really is more of a 2-level receiver, but he's a damn good one that can separate and can win for you on third downs? Which is your flavor? I think Mike Evans doesn't get the respect that he deserves. I think a lot of times when we start listing off receivers in this league and who's the best, Mike Evans' name rarely comes up, if ever. I can't think of a time where someone's put me on the spot and said, who's your top 5 receivers? I don't think there's ever been a time where Michael or Mike Evans' name popped into my head. Not once. And then it's not until we start talking about top 10 does he start to come into play. And it's still not until we get towards 7, 8, 9, 10, right around the 8, 9, 10 range. You know, there's always another guy. Like, if you would have asked me after the end of this last season, I'd name Justin Jefferson. He just got in the league. He only played in 1 season. But he's more dynamic and flamboyant than Mike Evans. So Mike Evans just kind of goes about his business human-like. He doesn't say a ton. He's not flashy, but he gets the job done every single year. I don't love the fact that Mike Evans isn't a great separator. I think he pushes off a ton, especially when the ball's down the field. He has to push off a lot. He can't separate, but he gets results, man. Michael Thomas, at one point after the 2019 season, a lot of people were saying it was either him or DeAndre Hopkins for best receiver in the league. We've never had that discussion about Mike Evans. And that may be our fault, not his. But we've never once had the discussion that Mike Evans is the best receiver in the league. There was this thought that Mike Evans or Michael Thomas was the best receiver in the league last year, after the 2019 season, excuse me. Now, you could also go to the argument, well, look who his quarterback was. He played with Drew Brees. You know, Mike Evans has played with a slew of quarterbacks. You know, Jameis Winston isn't chopped liver, okay? He's not minced meat. And we saw what, Evans did this year with Tom Brady. It was good. It wasn't great. He barely got over 1,000 yards this year, like 1,040 or something like that. It's not like he lit the world on fire, but he did have a ton of touchdowns, like 13 touchdowns, though. He found pay dirt. And so I want to know what you guys think. Who's the better of the 2 receivers? You got to pick one. I'll give you mine after I hear who you guys have. Rockman says Michael Thomas is the best wide receiver in the NFL. That's his opinion. So he's going with Michael Thomas, obviously. Captain Spartan says, I feel like Mike Evans has more consistency than Thomas. He does, but does that make him a better receiver? That's the question that I'm asking. Which one would you take? In I gotta have it moment. I need it right now. I'm starting a team, and I'm drafting a receiver, and it's one of these two guys. Which one of these guys are you taking? That's what I want to know. Starting a team, you got your quarterback, you got your offensive line. Now you need a receiver, and I'm not asking you about the rest of the guys in the league. These two guys are on the table. You got to take one. Who are you taking? Um, Rich says, I got Thomas, and it's not even close. He says Thomas is a top 3 wide receiver. Okay, so he's definitive with that. Um, Calvin Krim says, dude had 9 touchdowns 3 times, though, in terms of Michael Thomas. It's not 10. 10's not 9. All right. Or 9's not 10, I should say. But he's been close. But he didn't have 10. Got Any Grapes says, geez, the numbers looking like Thomas might not be better than Evans. That's where people kind of get the game twisted up is I don't think people realize what Mike Evans has been doing because Tampa hasn't been good. They haven't played in playoff games. They've been 7-9 or 8-8 almost every year. So it's easy to kind of just throw him similar to what people do with Keenan Allen. It's easy to just take Keenan Allen and throw him to the back of the bus because they ain't winning a bunch of ball games. So what he's doing out there is cool, but it's irrelevant in the grand scheme of things because they're not winning any games. It's easy to do that with him, with Mike Evans. But Evans is putting up numbers out there. And that's part of the reason I wanted to do this, kind of shed some light on that. But also I wanted to know how you guys felt about him and how you felt about Michael Thomas. Got a super chat here from Gunny Man. Gunny Man, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you, my guy. Gunny Man writes, I'll take Evans. Thomas is a bit of a diva. Evans plays hurt, doesn't complain about lack of balls. Like Jordan says, I'll take the guy with the ring. I think that is a very, very astute observation by you, Gunny Man. That's something that I did not bring up, but that's something that I do take into consideration. Michael Thomas is always getting into verbal spats with people on socials. He gets in his feelings quite a bit. Mike Evans is he just goes about his business human like. You don't hear him, and that's part of the reason that he's not all. I told you he's not a bunch of flash. He's more substance than flash. You know, a lot of these receivers, the reason we know their name, the reason their name is constantly in our mouth is because they're doing things other than performing on the field. Now, they got to perform on the field for you to give a shit, but they're doing things off the field to create this environment where their name is on the tip of your tongue. So when you start talking about best receivers in the league, oh, Odell Beckham, oh, Michael Thomas, is it because they're producing at a high level, which those dudes do on the field, or is it because they're kicking goalposts or they're getting into it with Josh Norman on socials? And because we're constantly talking about them, these are guys that you recognize and are always talking about. So they're in the front of your mind. They're in that consciousness that you have to have when you start making a list of receivers. Because Mike Evans is putting up similar numbers. He's not putting up the kind of numbers Michael Thomas has put up. The 2019 season for Michael Thomas was ridiculous. 149 catches, 1,700 plus yards. I don't know how many touchdowns he had, probably, 7, 8, or 9. But he was ridiculous in that year. Mike Evans hasn't had a season even remotely close to that. But what he's done is he's peppered you with 1,000-yard seasons over and over and over and over again. And then the occasional 13 or 12 touchdown season to go with it. So, there's something to be said about that. I do think Thomas is a bit of a diva. I don't like calling receivers. I don't like calling another grown man a diva. I don't like that phrase. I do think he's a bit of someone that likes the limelight. I think he's extra. Let's call him that. He's extra. Dudes that do the most are extra. Odell Beckham Jr. is extra. I think that Thomas is extra. Very, very much so. And there's something to be said about guys that just go about their business quietly. And that's Mike Evans. So thank you for that super chat, Gunny Man. Calvin Krim says, Thomas is better and it's not even close. We're talking about a top 10 guy versus a top 3 guy. Ouch. That hurts. But you know what? I understand where he's coming from with that comment, because what you're essentially saying is what I just said 7 minutes ago, which is Michael Thomas was once viewed as the best receiver in the league after 2019. And if he wasn't, he was two or he was three. Whereas Mike Evans has never been in that discussion, not once. And so I totally get where Calvin Krim is coming from. I totally understand. And he's a physical specimen and he does all the dirty work. He's physical. I get it. Totally get it. Got another comment here. This one is from my guy Buck Nation. Says, Mike Evans, come on, been underrated 4 years, but because Bucks haven't been good, no exposure for Evans or Levante David. And I just kind of touched on that, but that's how it happens. You know, talked about that with Keenan Allen as well. When you're not winning, when you're not on a team that is garnering national attention, it's easy to sweep what a guy is doing under the rug. But again, the biggest difference is Thomas was dominant at a level that few receivers achieve in this league, and Evans has never been that. He's just, again, he's bludgeoned you to death with consistency, and there's something to be said about that. Evans gets locked down by Lattimore. I mean, we see these things happen all the time. There have been matchups where Thomas hasn't had his way with corners. Lattimore and Evans have this, back and forth with each other. It's fun to watch. They take it personal. I love it. But Buck Nation says Evans is the bigger threat and bigger playmaker, period. He's the bigger playmaker. I would agree with you. I don't think I can't subscribe to he's the bigger threat. I think he is the bigger playmaker down the field. But on 3rd and 7, I'm probably more scared of Michael Thomas than I am Mike Evans. Now, with that said, I'm probably more afraid of Mike Evans on 1st and 10 or 2nd and 1 because of the threat of play action fake and Mike Evans getting vertical. I don't really worry about Michael Thomas getting vertical on me. So, not to say that he can't, but that's not how they utilize him in New Orleans. So, there's a lot of, back and forth, which is why I chose these two receivers. Buck Nation obviously is going to be biased. Mike Evans is his guy. Calvin Krim, that's a nice comment there. Let me show that one. My guy Calvin Krim says, Mike Evans is the Curtis Martin of wide receivers. Well said, Calvin Krim. Well put. I think that is a great comparison right now to where he is. And remember, Curtis Martin got in very quietly into the Hall of Fame. Nobody was paying attention. You look at his numbers and you're like, yo, Curtis Martin was a beast, but he got in, and I don't think a lot of people recognize just how good Curtis Martin was. And he didn't say a lot. He just went out and performed at a high level. So I definitely feel that one from Calvin Krim. My answer. So I got two answers, and I'm going to choose one. Okay. I'm not going to bitch up on you. I'm not going to, play both sides of the fence. If you told me on 3rd and 7, I had to have it right now. Game on the line. If I don't convert this, it's 4th and 7. Game on the line. I got to have it. I want Michael Thomas as my wide receiver. Because I think somebody's going to lock up Mike Evans, that slender frame. And then he's going to be looking at the official, or he's going to push off. Give me Michael Thomas. He's going to get open. He's going to force his way open, or he's just going to separate. And if they throw it in a tight window, he's going to come down with the ball. But if you're talking overall wide receiver, I'm starting a team, I'm compiling talent, I'm taking Mike Evans. Here's why. Because I know this guy's going to play every single week for the most part. I know this guy's going to produce at a high level. I don't think he's limited in any way, whereas I don't think Michael Thomas can get over the top vertically. Mike Evans has proven the ability to do that and go up and get the football at his highest point, even if he hasn't separated. I just love the consistency, the body of work Mike Evans has provided. Now, that said, Michael Thomas, to me, is the more superior talent. I just don't like all the things that come with Michael Thomas off the field. That's probably more so why I would go. If we're taking the off the field stuff out of the equation, give me Michael Thomas. Because I've said this already. When we have the conversation of top 5 receivers, his name gets brought up. Mike Evans' name doesn't. Now that he's with Brady, my perception of him has not changed one bit. He went to the Super Bowl. He was the best receiver on the Super Bowl winning team last year. I don't give a shit. My perception has not changed one bit on Mike Evans. Hell of a receiver, really good player, top 10 receiver in this league. He's not in the top 5. And he never will be. His talents don't suggest that he'll be a top 5 receiver. The production will always jump out at you. The fact this man has had 7 straight 1,000-yard seasons to start his career. No other receiver in NFL history. Not Jerry Rice, not Randy Moss. None of these guys have ever done that. Chris Carter, none of them. Only Mike Evans. If I'm starting a team, I want the selfless guy. I want the guy that doesn't make it about himself, but is about everybody else. I want the guy that I know is going to show up, and no matter how he's feeling, bad hammy, turned ankle, he's still going to go out and get me 7 balls for 101 yards. That's Mike Evans. We saw, and look, I don't ever like to talk about guys' injuries and their situation and whether they can or can't play. I don't like to play that game. I'm not in your body. But I saw Mike Evans last year. He make a conscious decision. I don't feel like playing. I felt like this. I don't know this to be a fact. But it felt like he wanted out of New Orleans last year. It felt Trent Williams-ish to me. Like he was trying to force their hand, and force his way out of New Orleans. It felt that way to me. And then all the verbal spats with people off the field, they're insignificant. Why are you arguing with them? Play ball. So, talent-wise, give me Michael Thomas. But if we're including all of the off-the-field stuff, which you have to, that's a part of it, give me Mike Evans.
LouieTeeNetwork.